Well, welcome, Brett Buddy Ascott.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, that's okay, mate. It's my pleasure. So you've been a successful musician for decades, of course, and with a lot of chart success along the way. So where did it all start musically for you, and why did you choose the drums?
Well, I think the drums chose me. I there was never any music in our house, so there was no inspiration there, and I didn't really have any musical background. Um, I just fell in love with the Who and Keith Moon's drumming, especially,
Yeah.
which was all the education I thought I needed. I probably could have done with a little bit of proper training, but I I've just realised I'm wearing my glasses.
That's
Um,
okay.
maybe it's better. Um, so it just came about organically.
Yeah.
I've never had a lesson in my life, and there was nobody in the family or at the house that was giving me a kind of a any kind of encouragement. It
Yeah.
was just something I felt I needed to do, and I fell in love with the Who. I bought Join Together
Hmm.
in '72, played the B side, which was a live version of Baby Don't You Do It. And I thought, ooh, this is terrible. And went back to it in about 3 years' time when I'd properly become an adolescent. And all of
Hmm.
a sudden it made much more sense.
Right.
And I remember listening to it and just thinking, how can one man make so much noise? I want to do this.
Hmm.
This is what I want to do.
How did you get? 'Cause this has always sort of intrigued me because with like singers or guitarists, it's quite easy to just sort of go out and get a guitar, isn't it? And to practice in your bedroom or whatever. But a drum kit's a completely different thing, isn't it? So, how did you get hold of your first drum kit, and where did you practice?
Okay, I didn't have a drum kit for years. I started off playing with knitting needles on biscuit tins.
Right.
Then I bought myself a pair of Premier drumsticks and was playing on pillows, basically.
Hmm.
Um, and then my dad had a second-hand shop up in Camden, just off the Euston Road,
Hmm.
and he would occasionally get drums brought in, usually stolen,
Hmm.
and I sort of started to purloin these, squirrel them away into my room.
Hmm.
And I constructed a sort of Frankenstein's monster of a drum kit over the course of a year, maybe 18 months. Nothing matched. There was Trixon, Slingerland, all different kinds of drums. Nothing fitted,
Hmm.
all different colours, and I didn't have a proper drum kit until the Chords signed a deal. So
Ah, right.
it was a very ad hoc education.
Well, didn't you play in bands at school as well?
I was in a sort of band, but they wanted to play stuff like uh, Lynyrd Skynyrd and Led Zeppelin and stuff. Not only
Yeah.
did I not know how to play those, and I couldn't play those, I had no interest in playing those. It was because I mean I had friends who were into Yes and Genesis and Caravan and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But I might buy a one album by something, but I had no interest. So I was listening to the Kinks and the Who and the Stones and the Beatles.
Hmm.
And what saved me was punk. When punk came along at the tail end of '76, I was 17, and I suddenly realised this was a call to arms. Um, and I didn't have to be the greatest drummer in the world.
Hmm.
And I joined a punk band and ended up playing the Roxy and Vortex, that kind of thing. And that was my education, really.
So that was a band called The Meat.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that sounded quite a colourful band. So, can you tell me how you joined the band?
I don't really know how they knew about me.
Hmm.
As I said, I didn't really have a drum kit. It was just pieced together. Somebody must have, a friend of a friend must have told them. And I went for an audition at a village hall somewhere. And within a couple of weeks, we were playing gigs. And I hadn't known any of these. And they were a tough lot. I mean, they were working class kids from the Erith, who would, the singer would. He's a tough nut, basically.
Yeah.
Quite happy to use his fists on the band or the audience
Right.
if he had to. But he was a very inspiring frontman.
What,
And then in the summer of '78, we were on our way to Hamburg
hmm,
via Paris, and we got sort of stranded in Paris because our manager had his passport stolen,
right.
apparently. Um, and we ended up playing the infamous Gibus Club.
Right.
And we had to stay for 6 weeks, and we ran out of money. We had to steal food to live.
Jeez.
Um, our guitarist was arrested for busking. And then we ended up playing a festival in front of 15,000 people, and there was a riot. I got tear gassed, and all the equipment was broken up or stolen. Our fans were getting chased with people with knives. It was a terrifying night. And we came back to London after 6 weeks. It was so odd. I had culture shock after being in Paris for that long. Um, and then the mod revival was starting to rear its ugly head at the beginning of '79. And I saw an advert in Melody Maker, Keith Moon type drummer wanted,
Hmm.
and the rest is hysteria.
It must have been a confusing time. I mean, I'm a little bit younger than you, so when punk came out, I was about
Most people are, Sean.
yeah. But yeah, there were so many different youth movements coming out a lot at that time, wasn't there? So obviously we had the prog rock stuff, and then we had punk, and then punk sort of disappeared, and we had sort of new wave bands and the mods and that sort of thing. What got you onto the mod stuff?
Well, that was easy for me because I was such a huge Who fan,
Yeah, of
and I
course, yeah,
was I was and always will be more of a Who fan than a mod.
yeah,
Um, their look and their sound from sort of '65 to '67 is a template for everything that I really love about music.
hmm,
Um, so when that came along, and when it said Keith Moon type drummer wanted, that was my natural home, and
hmm.
I turned up. I was the last one after a long day of auditions, and they were just packing away when I walked in. And I walked in, I was wearing a Target t-shirt and a parka,
Right.
and they all went, "Oh, okay, let's give this one a go." He looks the part,
Hmm.
and I broke the bass drum pedal, split my knuckle open on one of the rims of the tom toms, sprayed the drums with blood, and
Right.
they offered me the job.
Right.
So and we were gigging within a month.
Yeah.
I mean, Sean, going back to what you were saying about uh, youth movements and tribes and that kind of stuff. It was a time where it was just ever accelerating. So punk lasted for maybe a year, 2 years, and that morphed into new wave, and then power pop, and
Hmm.
then mod came along. But a mod was eclipsed almost immediately by ska,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was also then eclipsed by rockabilly for a couple of months. And then the new romantics came over the hill and just blew everything else out of the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you were clever, if you boxed clever like Madness did, you'd ride all these waves. So Madness went from ska into pop. They changed their production, and they've survived. And they had great songs, of course. But mod was a kind of albatross around your neck as much as it was a stepping stone early on.
Hmm.
And two of the group were mods,
Yeah.
Billy and Martin. But Chris and I were basically just Who fans.
Right. And
Um,
sorry, I was going to say, how did the songwriting work in the band?
um, the other three were writers, especially Chris,
Yeah.
a great songwriter, still is a great songwriter. Billy, I really love Billy's songs. There's a kind of simplicity to them. There's only three or four. Martin's a little bit more. sort of normal rock. They're not quite on the same level as the other twos.
Hmm.
I think he only wrote three and then stopped.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not a songwriter, so I don't know.
Yeah.
If I don't know if you can force it. If you don't feel it, I don't know how you can get up in the morning and say, "Okay, I'm going to write a song today." I think
Yeah.
that must be the hardest thing in the world. I think you'd have to wait for inspiration. I certainly am with my book that I'm writing.
Oh, you're writing a book. Oh, we'll get to that then if you like. If you
Yeah. Okay.
um so again going back to was it the Roxy where because you got a record deal based I'll go start again. You got a record deal with Jimmy Percy from Sham 69, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, we
Uh,
did. Yeah.
yeah. And he was another colourful character, wasn't he? So, what
That's
happened?
one way of describing him. Yeah.
So that was quite short-lived, wasn't it? Was it something to do with the a stage invasion? Was that at the Roxy as well?
No, no. So the Chords didn't play the Roxy. I don't know how Percy knew about us because Weller had come to the Wellington. Paul Weller had come and seen us.
Yeah.
Maybe he'd spoken to somebody at Polydor and said, "You should sign these kids." But the next thing we know, Jimmy Percy is inviting us in the studio to make a demo,
Right.
which we did in April '79. And 2 days later, we made a single with him
Yeah.
and signed a deal. And it was going to be the first single of the Mod Revival. He wanted it on red, white, and blue 12-inch vinyl. Um, and then we were supporting the Undertones on a tour around the UK.
Hmm.
We played in Guildford, and Percy turned up demanding to share the stage for the encore.
Right.
And the Undertones road manager politely turned him down. But that colourful character wouldn't take no for an answer, and he went crazy, did the whole "don't you know who I am" business, and
Ah,
then he came back later in the evening with Steve Jones and Paul Cook, and about 50 skinheads, and
right.
destroyed the gig. So the Undertones played about three or four numbers before it was abandoned. They just invaded the stage and kicked the amps over.
Right.
And I said that night, if we can't get out of this record contract, I'm leaving the band.
Yeah.
And this is at a point where Percy is just about the biggest star on Polydor. You know, he's had number one records and nobody says no to him.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and we're basically saying, fuck your record, and fuck your production.
Hmm.
It's not going to come out, not with our permission anyway.
Yeah.
And he went kind of bonkers, as you'd expect. Um, what we didn't know was that Polydor then looked at us with no manager, no track record, and thought, "Oh, what have we got here? We've got four idealistic, principled young men who aren't going to be bossed around." And they sort of got cold feet
Right.
and didn't pick up the option of taking us onto the main Polydor label.
Yeah.
So then we were in limbo for about 5 or 6 months
Yeah.
while we got overtaken by people like the Merton Parkers and the Lambrettas.
Hmm.
Um, and it was really John Peel that saved us because John Peel did a session that went down so well, they played it on the BBC World Service.
Ah, okay.
Um, and that started a bit of a bidding war. We played Dingwalls and Warners and Virgin
Hmm.
turned up. And then all of a sudden, Polydor thought, "Oh, actually, they have got something," and they quickly snaffled us up
Yeah.
on this sort of side deal. And then we released the single, re-recorded single in September '79.
Right.
But by then, it was the third or fourth time we'd already recorded it,
Right.
and the production wasn't great, and it rather stiffed at number 63 in the charts.
Right.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves, Jordan.
No, carry on, carry on. Actually, that's where
No,
I'm at.
well, that's yeah. So we'd signed to Polydor. Single came out. We did our own tour, and then we went in and made the album January 1980,
Yeah.
and including Maybe Tomorrow, and that was released in February. And
Yeah.
that was kind of a breakthrough in that, we got single of the week in NME and Sounds
Hmm.
and on Radio 1, and we got on top of the pops, but it stalled at number 40,
Yeah.
which I find inexplicable to this day.
I remember it.
Um,
I actually remember watching it on Top of the Pops. Yeah, really, really good. So it's one of those ones that I've forgotten it for years, to be quite honest, because again, I was quite young. And then when I was going through, researching for you, I was like, bloody hell, that's that record that I remember it. But, what was it like on Top of the Pops? So I always like asking this question. Was it a big surprise for you?
it was a surprise when we found out we got it because we were only number 44 in the chart, so we probably weren't expecting it. But they would pick some random new acts to put on, which is why the show kept so fresh for years. I think they
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
just have the top 10 in; they'd throw the odd maverick performer in, and we had to drive down from Preston, I think it was, um, and then you do a run through in the afternoon, um, which is eye opening. So the drums have got pads on them, the cymbals are made of fiberglass. So
Uh,
when you hit them, they just go clang, clang, clang.
mm.
Everyone's miming except the Nolans, who insist on singing.
Right.
Pan's people. Oh, I think it was Legs and Co. Then they sound like a load of horses as they're tramping around on the stage. All you can hear is their hooves. Um, and you see which groups are aloof and which ones are sort of there's some camaraderie. So we got on with AC/DC, and the second time we were on, we got on with Motorhead rather than our peers, if you like.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the things that you were talking about then is quite relevant because there were so many different sort of movements coming through, but also there was quite a lot of the people from the seventies and the early seventies still in the charts. So every time you watch Top of the Pops, in fact the charts in general, it was so varied. Whereas now it's all sort of R&B dance. But you get Top of the Pops with, as you say, like AC/DC, the Chords. You probably get a reggae band, a
Yeah,
novelty, the Nolans, all in one, and they're all in the charts at the same time. Which
and and the quality.
mm,
I mean, I think 1979 is the record year for sales. You had to
right,
sell something like 50,000 copies a week
yeah,
just to get in the top 50.
mm.
Now you'd be at number one within six
yeah,
weeks with that.
yeah,
I mean, I can't tell you the name of one single act in the
no,
top 20. Oh, sorry, the top 100. It's since Top of the Pops went and since everything became digital and download,
yeah,
everything is fragmented and there's no. It's the same with television, isn't it?
yeah,
There were three channels when I was growing up, not even four,
yeah,
and now there's 203. So nobody watches the same thing and nobody listens to the same thing. It's
yeah.
it's kind of sad. There's no shared experience anymore like that.
Yeah, exactly. It was. I mean, I remember sitting and watching the Top of the Pops with my parents, and my brothers and sisters and that sort of thing. They're all younger than me, and it was a big deal. We'd go to school and we'd talk about what was number one and stuff like that. And you don't see your kids talking about music, do you? Now it's just not there anymore.
I can't imagine they do. No, they've got other things to think about, probably.
Yeah, yeah. Um, where was I? Oh, how much did it change your life getting into the charts and being famous?
It's a funny thing. Actually, I sort of addressed this in the book. I don't feel like I've ever changed at all.
Yeah,
But what happens is that the way people approach you changes. So I would still go to the Black Horse on a Friday or a Saturday night,
yeah,
but all of a sudden people are going, "Oh, look at him! He's been on television," and I haven't changed, but they expect you to. So,
yeah,
if you buy a round, they think you're being flash. And if you don't, then you're probably being mean.
yeah,
I think one or two of us possibly did get a little bit above our station for a short while. I mean,
yeah,
it is, if you're if you're working class, and all of a sudden something that you've dreamt about for years happens,
Yeah, yeah,
it is it can be head spinning. You have to keep your feet on the ground, but as just the drummer, you're not really hogging the limelight anyway.
yeah.
Although I tried to.
So, when you were touring, which band member had the most irritating habits?
Probably me.
Yeah,
I mean, I lived for touring. I loved touring much more than recording. I found recording quite frustrating, really.
yeah,
Um, Now it's the other way around. But back then, I loved touring. I love the fact that the whole day, from the moment you get up in the morning
mm,
until you finally crawl into your pit, is based around 1 hour on stage,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
gives your whole day purpose. So that for me, that means I'm probably going to be hungover and miss breakfast. I'm probably going to spend the whole day trying to rehydrate and get enough salt and sugar down me, and then I'm going to probably try and have a little nap after the sound check. Um, and then I'm going to do everything I can on stage to be the best I can be, and then
yeah,
I'm going to get absolutely hammered afterwards. And there's no better feeling than coming off stage
yeah,
and just hitting the beers. It's something I miss, and I have no sympathy for people who say, "Oh, I've got to do this world tour." Oh, fuck off! You're going from 4 star to 5 star hotel in limousines and jets. I don't care. You're doing something that everyone else would pay to do. It's like professional footballers. Shut up moaning and
yeah.
just enjoy it while it happens. So, as for annoying, probably me because I would be drinking and breaking things afterwards. And
Right.
it's very hard to calm down after coming off stage.
Yeah.
The adrenaline doesn't switch off.
Right. What did you find most surprising about the first time you went into a recording studio?
Oh, I can still remember putting the headphones on and hitting the drums and going, I can hear myself because in a rehearsal room you don't. It's just a cacophony of flailing guitars and screaming vocals, and you're just fighting to be heard, and you've got no electronic way of turning up. You've just got to hit them harder. And
Mm.
then you're in a recording studio and you just brush the snare drum and you go, oh, I can hear that. And it's totally different. The separation and the isolation of it is fantastic. I still get a buzz from going into a rehearsal room and then going into a recording studio, and suddenly everything that you've been trying to do makes sense because you can hear yourself properly,
Yeah, yeah,
and you don't have to kill the drums with volume because the microphones are doing the work.
yeah.
It's
Well,
funny as you see drummers develop through uh, their career. Most of them tend to hit lighter and lighter because they've got better and better sound systems and microphones.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I don't because I'm still a tub thumper, I'm afraid.
Well, as you said, the band's timing was a bit unfortunate, wasn't it? Because you were getting some hits and stuff, but Scar came out. The music scene was always moving on really quickly back then, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And, so did your record company try to change you in any way? Did Polydor say, evolve or something like that?
no, nobody has ever even tried to tell the Chords to do anything. I mean, the Percy episode should tell you that we were kind of unmanageable, and we turned down management from John Weller, Andy Ferguson, who was the Undertones manager, and from Jim Gordon, who was Sham 69's manager. We just turned them all down.
Yeah,
Personally, in retrospect, I think we should have signed with Andy Ferguson and probably a different record label, but that's another story. No, we didn't have a manager. We didn't have a publicist, an agent. Oh, we had an agent for live work, and that was Ascott, the agency, who were
yeah,
quite good actually. But we didn't have any. It was just the four of us making decisions.
right.
And if we happened to turn up at a photo session and we happened to match, we looked quite good together, then that was luck rather than judgment. We didn't phone each other up and say, right, what are you wearing tomorrow?
Yeah.
We were very, very naive, and we were very organic, and we were very unorganized, and everything was unplanned. It just we were sort of the opposite of Secret Affair,
Right.
who had a sort of manifesto, and they had a uniform, and they had a committed army following them. We didn't have any of that.
Hmm.
We were just the Chords, and we were just ourselves. And at the end of the day, the music was the most important thing,
Yeah.
the only thing really, and it's the thing that's lasted. I hope.
Yeah. I think it has. I think it has. It's what happened with Billy Ascott? You know,
Well, no, it's funny. I mean, we beat ourselves up about this at least twice a year. I'm great mates with Billy now, and in retrospect, we both think that we were idiots. Um, he got married um, very early on, and he was young. I mean, I was the oldest, and I was 19 when we started, so he would have been 18. He was probably
yeah.
married at 19 to a local girl, a lovely girl called Joan, who's sadly no longer with us. Um, and he, of course, he's newly married. He wants to bring her on tour, and he wants to bring her to the recording studio. He doesn't want to be away from her. Now, I can understand that now. And though I had a girlfriend at the time, I couldn't understand it then, and nobody else could, and it caused a lot of friction.
Right.
And it because we didn't have a manager, we had no one to knock our heads together and say, just find a compromise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm afraid push came to shove. Um, there was an incident, and then he started traveling with the road crew. We were on tour promoting In My Street, which is our sort of second most successful single. I think Top of the Pops was on strike. It's just
Ah,
our luck.
right.
We didn't have a lot of luck. Anyway, we managed to finish the tour, but that was it. It was we were such loggerheads. We couldn't continue. We could have done if someone had sat us down in a room and we just blithely said, "Oh, okay, we'll get another singer."
Yeah.
What the fuck? What kind of group sacks their singer and
Mm.
expects to carry on when he's the face and the voice and the image of the group? And we interviewed about 150 people. We auditioned about 30. Um, we chose a chap called Kip, who's one of the loveliest people you could ever meet. He'd been the second singer in the Vibrators, so he'd come off the bench before to be a substitute.
Mm.
We made two further singles that I think are at least the equal of anything we did with Billy, but we couldn't get arrested by this point. It's now mid 1981.
Yeah.
Mod has been dead for a year.
Right.
Polydor didn't put any money. We never made a video. Polydor never paid for a video.
Right.
7 singles. This is the time when videos are taking off.
Yeah.
No investment. So it was a real shame. I didn't speak to Billy for 4 years,
Yeah.
but we were reconciled. I was playing in a band. We were playing in Dublin on the day of Live Aid,
Mm.
and I somehow I managed to get his address, and I sent him a telegram. This is how long ago it was. And he turned up at the hotel, and I ended up dragging him on stage that night.
Oh,
So, and to cut a long story short, I met my second wife when I went to visit him in Japan,
mm.
and our whole histories are entwined.
This, it's very Spinal Tap, a lot of this, isn't it?
Um, Hopefully not quite that bad.
Just little bits of it here and there, It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
um,
mean, yeah, we had about as much luck as Spinal Tap. Yeah.
well, I mean, the Calls called it a day, but you carried on working with other members of the band, didn't you? After that,
With
still,
Yeah, me and Chris got a band together pretty quickly called Agent Orange.
yeah,
We got a chap called Grant Fleming in on bass. We had a couple of singers. The first one was Bob Smeaton, who ended up as a TV director. If you look him up, he's had a more successful career than any of us. He directed that Beatles documentary, All You Need Is Love.
Oh, okay, right.
So he's really left his mark. And then we got another singer in called Kevin, lovely bloke, lives in the States now. And we came very, very, very close to a deal. Virgin 10, which was
Hmm.
their kind of new imprint, wanted to sign us. They put us in the studio. We made a great demo, and they said, "Right, we want you to sign a 6 album deal for this 60 grand or something." And then we went, "Oh no, let's not make the same mistake as last time. Let's get management in."
Hmm.
And I can still remember the afternoon. Danny Goodwin rang me up and he said, "I've heard you're getting management." And I said, "Yeah, is that a problem?" And he said, "I promise you, if you get management, and you will lose this deal." And
Oh,
we did one more demo, and then the whole thing collapsed.
bloody hell.
But Virgin did something that I've never heard any other record label do before or since. They gave us £10,000,
Ah,
which was a lot of money in 1984.
yeah,
And they said, "That's for fucking you around. And it's only repayable if you sign a deal with another label."
right.
And we all managed to get, I got a new drum kit, my second drum kit.
Hmm. Hmm.
um, I think the singer bought a car. We shared it out. And we soldiered on for a bit under the name Tin Soldiers, funnily enough. We sort of changed our name. But that knocked the stuffing out of us, and we sort of split up.
Right. Well, you carried on working with a lot of people, didn't you? I mean, was it Spectrum, the band Spectrum with Steve Marriott?
Yeah, well, Spectrum was a one-off charity thing. So
Yeah,
that Live Aid, obviously, I think people forget how big Live Aid was as a phenomenon, and that sort of inspired this group of mod musicians to get together.
yeah.
I was lucky enough. I was lucky enough to be the drummer, and we did one rehearsal, and then turned up at the studio. The Kenny Lynch, was producing.
Right.
Did you know he produced the Small Faces in the 60s?
No, it was sort of a running joke in the 80s. That it
Yeah.
was on what was it that panel show with the
Oh God, Celebrity Squares.
Celebrity Squares, yeah. And it
Yeah.
was a running joke that nobody knew what he'd actually, what does Kenny Lynch do other than play golf with Jimmy Tarbuck? Um,
Yeah.
Later on, I
No,
figured,
he was a songwriter. He wrote songs for the Small Faces as well.
all right,
Anyway, he was in charge that day, and everyone was waiting for me because you probably know when you're recording, the drums are the first thing to go down usually.
yeah, yeah.
And they wanted to make a 12-inch record, and nobody knew how to make a 12-inch record in 1985. And they just said, "Okay, you're going to have to play for 8 or 9 minutes without making a mistake," which I've never done in my life. And all these people are waiting for me. He's got Steve Marriott, PP Arnold, Chris Farlow. They're all going, "Clock's ticking." And yeah, it was a lot of pressure. And then they brought the camera crew in, and I did it right first time, which very impressed Kenny Lynch. He thought I was waiting for the camera.
Was it quite intimidating working with people like that? Because obviously, was it Reg Presley and Mick Talbot as well?
Oh well, Mick's lovely. Mick's a
Yeah.
lovely man. Um, he's one of the four gentlemen of rock and roll, as I like to call him. I've worked with Mick many times since.
Mm.
He's played on a couple of the Pope albums. Brilliant musician, completely different class to what I'm used to.
Yeah.
No, I tend not to get intimidated. The most incredible thing I ever saw was on the second Mod Aid single, which was 2005. And we were at a tiny little studio in Bow called Gizzard. And they
Mm.
said, "Okay, Ronnie Wood's coming down to play slide guitar." And I said, "Yeah, of course he's going to come down here." It's a kind of tiny little studio in the middle of nowhere. And we were going through the backing track, the door opens, and Ronnie Wood walks in. And that was That was pretty intimidating.
Mm.
But managed to get you can either be intimidated or be inspired. So hopefully it was the latter. But then I stayed to watch him do his slide guitar, and I've never seen anything like it, Sean. He's got one can on, one headphone off, and just sitting there. And it's like watching Usain Bolt amongst a load of old ladies running along. He's just such a different level of professionalism and natural talent. You can tell that he's been playing every single day for the last 60 years, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
The same with Mickey Torva, actually.
yeah.
There's a level of professionalism that is just mind blowing.
You later became a producer yourself, didn't you?
Well, I sort of picked up bits and bobs. I did nothing during the Chords time.
Yeah.
After finishing the drums, I would just get drunk and break things and let off fire extinguishers and then fall asleep.
Right.
When I should have been actually paying attention. But when I came back to the UK and started the band Pope with Chris Pope, we worked with the engineer Pat Collier, and it was just the three of us. We did two
Yeah.
albums with just the three of us, and I had to be there the whole time because someone needed to guide Chris with vocals and suggestions, which didn't always work. But
Mm.
I learned so much from Pat. Mainly, I learned try it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and the band proper asked me to produce a couple of their singles. We've done an album now, and I was very flattered. But I really felt I grew into it. I wanted to go to their rehearsals
Mm.
to help them arrange the songs because that's also part of being a producer. And luckily, they took most of it on board, not all of it.
Mm.
And then you go to the studio, and it's about being diplomatic. It's about being encouraging,
Mm.
um, and also about being imaginative. And if you know what is possible, then you can keep trying things. And if you do it in the right way, if you're nice about it, if you're not demanding,
Yeah.
I think that you can get the best performance out of people. Just try that one more time.
Yeah.
I think you've got one better in you. Um, and I actually really enjoyed that aspect of it. I don't have I can't write music, and I can't play any other instrument, but I always know if the guitars are out of tune
Yeah.
before the guitarist. I don't know why. It's just a gift.
Well, are you still playing? You're still playing with the Dear Boys, aren't you, at the moment?
I'm playing with the Dear Boys, which is Tony Fletcher, the
Hmm.
acclaimed author and journalist. Um, we made two singles last year. We're making another one, I think, in about a month. We start rehearsals very soon.
Hmm.
Um, Tony uh, Tony Page is the singer. He's got a lovely voice. It reminds me of Robert Wyatt. Um, and Tony Fletcher lives in New York State, so I don't know, I think it's ever going to be a gigging band,
Right.
but but arranging and recording is a lot of fun with them.
Yeah. Tell us about your book. What's your book about? Is that like a autobiography?
Yeah, it's an autobiography, but I'm not going to tell you what it's about. Um, yeah, it's becoming a bit of a monster. I started it in lockdown, like most people,
Yeah.
along with brewing beer, but that's long gone. Um, I think it's got to be honest. If it's not 100% honest, there's no point doing it.
Yeah.
I hope I don't hurt too many people, um, but I will be bearing everything. Um, and it sort of starts in Paris in '78.
Hmm.
Um, and I've done a couple of chapters on the chords. It's 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 going to be my life probably from up until when I left this country in '92 to go traveling.
Yeah.
And then there might be a second one, who knows?
Right.
Well, let's get the first one done first.
Excellent. Well, thanks for the chat. It's been really, really, fascinating. I've always loved your music, and it's nice to actually talk to someone from the band live as well. So brilliant. Thanks for doing this for us.
Not at all. You're very welcome.
Okay, mate. Well, you take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Cheers.